What's up, you freaking geniuses? So here we're going to identify the focus, directrix, and axis of symmetry of the parabola. And then it says graph this equation. All right, so here the problem is y squared is equal to 16x. All right, so where do you start? So the first thing you always want to do is, if this isn't already in standard form, you want to put it in standard form, right? So standard form is something like this. It'll look something like y is equal to ax squared, or it'll look like x is equal to ay squared, all right, where a over here is just some number, just some constant, okay? And a lot of times for these, it'll be a fraction, actually, okay? So we need to take this equation and turn it into one of these. So we need to either solve for y, so we get y is equal to the equation, or solve for x, so we get x is equal to the equation. So which one do you solve for? Well, whichever one has the exponent, leave that one alone. Okay, so here the y has the exponent, right? It's y squared. We're going to leave that one alone. So that means we're going to solve for x. So if we're going to solve for x over here, let's get rid of this 16 by dividing both sides by 16. Okay, those cancel out. So then we get that x, just flipping it, right? So we're going to get x is equal to y squared over 16, all right? Or another way that we could write this is just factoring out the denominator, which I would highly recommend for these problems. So you're going to write it as x is equal to 1 over 16 times y squared. Okay, cool. So now that we have it in our standard form, now we can start graphing this. Okay, so how do you know which way this parabola is going to open up? Is it going to open up up like that, or down like that, or to the left, or to the right? Well, one way I like to think of it is whenever you have x is equal to something, x is equal to your equation over here, one thing that helps me remember which way it opens is there's some weird people on this earth who draw their x's like that, okay? So then I remember, okay, if I have x is equal to our equation, then the parabola is going to open either left or right like that, okay? So it's either going to open up like that or like that. Okay, and for example, let's say for our equation over here, what if the x and y were flipped? So what if we actually instead got y is equal to 1/16 x squared, okay? Well, here I have a y is equal to something, right? So then in this case, I remember that it's going to open up like that or down, because this kind of looks like a big y, right? But again, it can also look like that, all right? So then in this case, it would just be an upside down y. Okay, so those are just a couple ways that might help you remember which way the parabola opens. So in this case, we have x is equal to our parabola, right? So we know it's going to open left or right. Okay, so now that we know that, the next thing we have to do is figure out where the focus and directrix are. And to do that, all you have to do is take your fraction and make sure if it's negative, make sure to include the negative sign. So take that whole fraction, in this case it's positive, so we're going to say the 1/16, and we're going to set that equal to 1 over 4p, okay? And we're going to solve for p, because that's going to tell us where the focus is. So here we can really just set the denominators equal to each other, right? Positive 16 is equal to 4p. So then when we get, divide both sides by 4, right? So then we get that 4 is equal to p, right? Positive 4 is equal to p. So the focus is at positive 4, okay? So that means that the focus is going to be at 1, 2, 3, 4 right here, okay? How do I know that the focus is right there? Well, first of all, remember, we know that the parabola is going to either open that way or this way. And remember, the parabola always looks like it's going to eat the focus, right? This is like a big mouth. So then in this case, we know that the parabola is actually going to open up in this direction to the right. And so our focus is here at positive 4, right? Where the exact coordinates would be 4, 0, right? That's the focus. So that means the directrix would be over here, right? It would just be a vertical line in this case at x is equal to -4, right? Because the focus and the directrix are the exact same distance away from the vertex of the parabola. And the vertex of the parabola in this case, for all these problems, are right here at 0, 0. Okay, and we also know that the directrix is a vertical line here because remember, it's always perpendicular to the axis of symmetry of the parabola, right? So this is our parabola, so that means the axis of symmetry would be right here, right? It always goes straight through the vertex. Okay, so the directrix always makes a 90-degree angle, a right angle, with the axis of symmetry. And here the axis of symmetry would just be at the x-axis, right? Or you could also say y is equal to 0, right? Those are the same thing. Okay, cool. So we figured out where the focus is, right? 4, 0. The directrix is at x is equal to -4. And the axis of symmetry is at the x-axis, or y is equal to 0, right? And we also graphed our parabola. Okay, so this parabola opened up side to side, left to right. So let's do one more example where it opens up or down, because it's just going to be a little bit different. All right, here's the last one. So again, we're just identifying the focus, directrix, and axis of symmetry of the parabola, and then graphing it, right? So here we have 6x squared plus 3y is equal to 0, right? So again, the first thing is just putting it in standard form. So the exponent on this one is on the x, right? So we want to leave x squared alone. So that means we want to solve for y, right? So the first thing we're going to do is throw this 3y to the other side. Okay, so let's subtract 3y from both sides. Those cancel out. So then we get that 6x squared is equal to -3y. Okay, here we'll divide both sides by -3. Okay, those cancel out. So then here we get 6 divided by -3 is -2, right? So -2x squared is equal to y. Okay, or we can just write it as y is equal to -2x squared. All right, so notice we don't have a fraction this time, so it's going to make our math a little bit more difficult, but I'll show you how to go through that. All right, so the next thing again we can do is start graphing it. So let's figure out which way this parabola is going to open. Okay, so here we have y is equal to our equation, right? So y means our parabola is going to look like a y, right? It might look like an upside down y. Okay, we'll figure that out in a second, but at least we know it's going to open up or down, right? So in order to figure out which way it opens up, we have to figure out first where the focus is. So again, to do that, you just have to take whatever your coefficient is here. So in this case, it's just a -2, right? So we're going to say that -2 is equal to 1 over 4p, okay? And then we're going to solve for p again. Okay, so the first thing we have to do here is get p out of the denominator since we're trying to solve for it. So we're going to multiply this side by p, and whatever we do to one side, we do to the other, right? So we'll also multiply this whole side by p. So p times -2 is just equal to -2p, and then that's equal to, let's see, on this side, these p's canceled out, so then we're just left with 1/4. Okay, so then here, to solve for p, get rid of the -2 by dividing by -2. Okay, so then these -2's cancel out, so then we're just left with p is equal to 1/4 divided by -2. Whenever you have a fraction divided by a whole number, you can actually just combine the fraction, or sorry, the denominator with the whole number. That's kind of a shortcut way of doing it. So 4 times -2 is equal to -8, right? So then we'll have 1 over -8, right? So we get p is equal to 1 over -8, or we could just say that p is equal to -1/8. Okay, so remember, p tells us where the focus is. So it's at -1/8, right? And we know it's going to be along the y-axis because we know the parabola is going to open up like that or down like that. So if it's at -1/8, and let's just draw some tick marks to make it a little bit more clear. Let's say this is 1 and 2, 1 and 2. Okay, so -1/8, right? Very close to the x-axis. Okay, so remember, our parabola wants to eat the focus, right? So it's going to go in that direction. And then if we want to label this, the focus, let's do it in blue, and then I'm just going to write it right here. So the focus is at 0, -1/8. Okay, so then that means the directrix, right? The directrix, let's just draw it about right there, would be at +1/8. And this would, it runs through the y-axis, right? So we know it's at y is equal to +1/8. Okay, and lastly, the axis of symmetry, remember, just runs through the vertex, right? So in this case, it would just run right straight through the y-axis, right? So it runs right through the y-axis, or you could also call this x is equal to 0. So if you found the video helpful, definitely leave a thumbs up down below. And if you have any other questions or want to see any other examples, just let me know in the comment section below.